Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our session on sustainable agriculture with Mr. Maki Tross. So, Maki, you can take over whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Kathleen, and good evening to you and good evening to all of you lovely ladies. This is the first in 4 sessions on sustainable agriculture, and we're going to be looking at ways to improve and do agriculture in a more sustainable way. During this session, we would be looking at a few broad topics: soil health. We would look at water resource management. We would look at climate change. We would look at protective agriculture. Now, under those headings, I will try and break them down as much as possible. Now, this part of the course itself is where we normally would do most of the hands-on stuff. In this virtual space is a little bit difficult, but I'll try to make it as practical and as possible. Now, when we talk about sustainable agriculture, there's really no one definition that covers sustainable agriculture. There's several schools of thought when it comes to sustainable agriculture. But before we get into the meat of the matter, I just want to take a minute to do some housekeeping matters. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Maki Tross. Just a little bit of background. I did not do agriculture post-secondary. I did agriculture, I basically grew up with my father and mother doing agriculture. So I had some hands-on in agriculture from a very early age. I did agriculture at GCE. Fortunately or unfortunately, I was away from the soil and planting for a few years. I migrated to Canada in my late teens, did my post-secondary studies in electronics engineering technology at the DeVry Institute, Toronto campus. Worked as a biomedical engineer in Toronto for 10 years, moved back home to Nevis, St. Kitts Nevis, 2000. So I'm back here now, say about 22 years. Interestingly though, when I moved back because of my background, I found some work in the IT department and at the hospital doing biomedical work. But it was not until 2010 or thereabouts that the interest in agriculture peaked again. I mean, I always had a little backyard garden to feed the kitchen and to give my family, siblings, a lettuce or two and tomatoes. But back in 2010, my first son came home with an agricultural project. And my wife went to agriculture department and she picked up a tray of 72 tomato seedlings. And at that time, I had some big dogs, some big Great Danes, and those dogs, they trample and pull everything. So when she told me about the project, I said, sweetheart, we have to fence around an area in the yard. It's still there. So I started to fence the area. It's about 20 by 30. We planted the tomato seedlings. And the project was basically to nurture these seedlings, look after them, and record their growth and progress until they bear fruits and so on. And could you imagine 72 tomato seedlings? We had so many tomatoes that I couldn't find friends and family and neighbors to give. So one day my wife said to me, listen, you've got a small folding table, take it down to the store. I'll give you a tablecloth and we'll put the tomatoes, maybe 5 in a bag, and we'll put them on the table and see what happens. I was a little bit perturbed about that because I was into my electronics and office equipment. And I keep saying, listen, electronics and produce don't mix. But, you know, women persistent. And after about 3 or 4 days, I gave in, took the table down, put the tablecloth on it. And that morning, it was about 25 bags of tomatoes. She was across the street from me at Social Security. That time, Social Security Nevis was still in the heart of town. And I would pick her up for lunch. When I picked her up, she said, listen, Trust, tell me what happened. And I just kept smiling and laughing. She said, Trust, tell me what happened. I said, girl, we need tomatoes to sell. And so the long and the short of the story is that that crop of tomato went, and we planted some more tomatoes, and we added some peppers and lettuce, and we just made it a family project. And needless to say, that 20 by 30 space in the backyard that I fenced around was really not sufficient in about 6 months. Luckily for me that the adjacent land to me came available. And so we purchased that and started farming. And in a couple of years, that was not enough either. And I mean, if you know where I live, it's a big plot of land. It's almost 3/4 of an acre. And so we moved over to Hard Times, started doing some farming out there, and then realized that the community at large was taking a likeness to the produce. But I had one problem after. I realized that in the summer months, June, July, August, down to September, it was very difficult to keep up with the market and produce the same quality crops outside. So I decided to do some research into protected agriculture and got into the greenhouse technology. So in a nutshell, that's where I am today. Sufficing to say that we moved from the backyard to the lot adjacent over to Hard Times on 1 1/4 acre. And then from 1 greenhouse to now 4 greenhouses. And we now produce a variety of crops: lettuce, tomatoes, peppers, scallions, spinach, and the list goes on. So, you know, that is my story. I know everybody have a slightly different story. And I want to believe that most of us aren't from an agricultural background professionally, but from St. Kitts Nevis, I know most of us could relate to farming in the backyard or going on the family farm or some neighbor or relative. So, you know, it will be interesting to find out, and I'm sure I will during the course of these lectures, that we're from different and varying backgrounds, but coming together, we could all share some light and information as to where we started, where we are, where we're going, and feed off of each other's energy and experiences to get there. Now, it is against that backdrop that I want to start my presentation. Now, before I get into the slides, back up a bit, Linnell, sorry. Yeah, before I get into the slides, I just want to, I came across this the other day and I found it very interesting. Every time we make a food choice, we are deciding on how our food will be produced in the future. Every time we buy food that is produced locally and from a sustainable place, we're influencing how our dollars are spent. I believe collectively, we can have an enormous impact on how our food is produced. Each day, we need to think about the ways that we can make agriculture more sustainable or live more sustainable. Sustainable agriculture is better in every aspect. I mean, the food is more nutritious. The taste is much better. It's better for the animals. It's better for the environment. And for me, it is a win-win situation. So now we could skip on to slide 2, Linnell. If I may ask, what is sustainable agriculture? And what does it mean to you? Like I said, there's no one definition or one answer, but I'd like to hear from a few of you. What does sustainable agriculture mean to you? So don't be shy, we're all here to learn. There's no wrong answer, so let's go. What is sustainable agriculture and what does it mean to you?
Good night.
Good night.
Sustainable agriculture means the practicing of is the practice of agriculture without compromising the future.
Okay, that's good. Someone else? Different perspective?
My thoughts.
Go ahead.
Okay, yes, my thoughts are when I say sustainable, I think something that is maintained. So I'm thinking agriculture that is not seasonal, something agriculture that lasts pretty much a lifetime.
Beautiful. That's 2 points of view. Very good. I'll take another and another. So 2 more, please.
Okay, good evening.
Good evening.
Sustainable agriculture is a practice whereby you use your resources that you have in a manner so that it does not compromise the soil, the area you're working, persons who are using the products, and it is something that could be continued over a period of time.
Good.
Okay.
Yep. One more.
Hi, good night.
Good night.
When I hear sustainable, I think about renewable energy. So I would say sustainable is something that is healthy to the environment, that you can use in different ways.
Beautiful. And the list goes on and on, but I think that we are on the right track. I just want to say the picture on your screen is a shot that I took from A1 Farms. Just blow it up, and that is just 2 aisles of tomatoes. So most of the pictures that I would use is from A1 Farms, just to keep it real and to keep it local. I've stepped outside only if I had to, only if I couldn't find anything appropriate. So just so you know. Lena, let's go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so like I said, there's really no one answer, but I think we have the general concept that sustainable agriculture is farming in sustainable ways, meeting society's present food and textile needs. And we heard a mention of not compromising the ability for current or future generations to meet their needs, not compromising the soil either, and not compromising the environment or anything that we deemed that has real life. Consists of environment-friendly methods of farming that allows the production of crops and livestock without damage to human and natural systems. Now, that is just my take on it, my research take on it. But if I was not to do the research, I think I would put something on the table just like you guys did. But that is the general message that I'm trying to convey. It's farming continuously without making any compromise to now or for future. Whether it, and it doesn't impact the climate, so we won't affect or contribute to climate change, deforestation, or any of those things. We will get into methods and all of that later on. Next slide. We would now look at some of the key components of sustainable agriculture. Now, I've got some here, but they're not limited to what I have, because as you would imagine, there's all types of good practices out there. But I just try to put the major ones to drive the points, the point of sustainable and sustainability and sustainable agriculture home. Soil management, soil health, that's a key. And an old guy once told me that the health of the soil really determines how much money we as a farmer put in our back pockets, and that is deep. So we start with healthy soil, and we have to manage that soil. What we're going to do with the soil, we're going to put crops in the soil. So the management of the crops is very important as well. As we all know, water, as the water department has a slogan here in St. Kitts Nevis, says water is life. And water is very, very important. Water definitely is life. Life for crops, life for humans, life for animals, life for every living thing, basically. Now, if we're going to farm, we have to deal with pests and diseases. So pest and disease management is something that we have to take into consideration. Climate change is a big thing that has been going around for the last 25 to 50 years. And what I would say here, we would get into climate change later, but what I would say here is that as a small developing country, we really don't contribute too much to climate change, but we're affected big time by climate change because of our graphical location. Protective or protected agriculture is one of the key areas as well. Innovation and technology, I like that one. So we'll spend some time on that one as well. Market linkages, I think Kamara would have done a great job with that over the three sessions that went previously. Post-harvest management. One of the facilitators would look at that and look at food safety. Financial literacy. I think Telly would look at that, but these are all key components of sustainable agriculture. So we realize that we're not just talking about planting a crop and just nurturing that crop and bringing it to the table. We are talking about a wholesome approach to sustainable agriculture. Market linkages, sustainable, soil health, diseases, post-harvest management, pests and diseases, all of these things come together is part of the sustainable agriculture chain. We could move on to the next slide, please. Now, let's go a little bit into some of the key areas. Let's spend a little time talking about soil health. Soil health is defined by the level to which it can continually provide multiple functions to sustain plants, animals, and human lives. I think that in itself is self-explanatory. The better the soil is, well, in local terms, we just say the soil is rich, If the soil is rich, the soil would produce good crops that would bring forth healthy fruits and vegetables. And then those of us who consume the food would be the better for it. The management goal for healthy agricultural soil is to supply the nutrients needed for optimal plant growth in the right quantity and the right time, while minimizing nutrient losses to the surrounding environment. Now, yes, we would have to add nutrients, but the timing is very important and the amount is very crucial as well. It makes no sense to have a seedling that is maybe 2 weeks old and you're adding a lot of nitrogen or general fertilizer to it. We stand the risk of burning that fragile plant with the fertilizer. So what we're saying is that the timing and the amount of fertilizer and the type of fertilizer, for that matter, is critical. Now, some fertilizers are rich in nitrogen, and nitrogen contributes to healthy leaves. And so initially, when the plant is growing, you would want to add a more nitrogen base to the plant. Lettuce, for example, and most leafy greens thrive on a nitrogen-filled fertilizer. Now, organic fertilizers like rabbit manure is very, very good in terms of adding nitrogen to the soil. And pause here to say that rabbit is one of the few, rabbit manure is one of the few manure that you could add without curing to the plant. Now, on the contrary, if you were to add chicken manure in the fresh state, that chicken manure would burn most plants because it's very strong. Once the rabbit manure is not mixed with the urine, then you're free to do so. So simply put, the health of the soil determines how profitable and sustainable your farming enterprise will be. Okay? Let's move forward, Lena. We see here we have different management practices to improve the soil health. Now, we would hear and see the tractors tilling the soil, especially when they were doing sugarcane instant kits. The cane fields might be a little bit different because there's two schools of thought. Most of the cover from the top of the cane was left in the field, and what they used to do is plow that in or till it back into the soil to put organic matter into the soil. But in terms of sustainable agriculture, one of the schools of thought is that we should reduce inversion tillage and soil traffic. And we'll flesh that out later. Manage nutrients. You don't want to add too little, and you don't want to not add at all. So you have to manage the nutrients in the soil. We have to encourage increased organic matter inputs. We have to, where possible, reduce the use of pesticides, and this would provide a habitat for beneficial organisms such as earthworms and other beneficial insects. Now, we have to use cover crops, especially in time when we're not tilling the soil. The soil should not be left bare for any period of time. This exposes the soil to erosion, wind and rain, but like I said, we'll flesh that out a little bit later. Crop rotation and mixed cropping, very important parts of the management practices to improve soil health as well. Let's go forward, Lena. And now, so we're gonna look a little bit deeper into the reducing of inversion tillage, or plowing as we know it locally. And off the bat, we realized that we have a problem with the plow going through the land over and over again, because those tractor tires are big and heavy. The weight of the tractor compresses the soil. And so we have some issues right off the bat. Now, tillage increases oxygen in the soil, stimulating microbial activity, and results in the decomposition of organic matter. However, excessive tillage is harmful to the soil in several ways. I just mentioned the compaction, and so we'll see what else. Over-tillage disrupts soil aggregates, exposing particles of organic matter that had been physically protected within aggregates for microbial consumption. And so if the microbes can't feed, then what would happen? They would die. And we have some issues there. In addition, if additions of organic matter are not sufficient to counteract the losses from decomposition, organic matter levels will decline over time, reducing soil health. Don't want that. Inversion tillage also reduces the soil coverage provided by crop residues, leaving the soil more exposed to erosion. And this erosion could be wind erosion or by heavy rainfall. So conservation tillage is recommended. We would look at maybe a little 3-minute video here that would drive this point home, and I urge you to please pay attention to it. Lena.
And I don't know, I'm not too sure if that's supposed to be a YouTube video.
Just click on it to the bottom, right to the bottom. There's a space where you just click and it would open and play. Yeah, that's it. Just play it now. Yeah.
How do you make a farm or ranch more sustainable? There's no single answer, but there are some common practices used by producers across the country to improve profitability, quality of life, and environmental stewardship. So in this episode, let's look at conservation tillage and soil health. Now, it used to be that every farmer in town would till their fields after harvest to get ready for spring planting. Now, besides burning a lot of time and fuel, we now know that tillage does a lot of harm to the soil. Tillage kills beneficial soil organisms and makes organic matter break down faster. And under intensive tillage, the soil loses its structure and gets compacted. Now, when this happens, rain can't soak into the soil like it should. Without a mat of residue on top or living plant roots down below, bare soil washes or blows away easily during storms. And over time, all of this makes it harder to grow a healthy crop. Now, it's tempting to use more tillage to fix these problems, but that only makes things worse. Now, more farmers are retiring their conventional tillage equipment and turning to conservation tillage instead. So the goal of conservation tillage is to disturb the soil as little as possible, with no-till and reduced tillage methods that leave at least 30% of the residue from your previous crop on the soil's surface. Now, during heavy rains, this extra residue acts like armor that protects the soil from eroding and slows down water loss when the weather turns hot and dry. Over time, we see even more benefits. The organisms in the soil thrive and feed on organic matter. The structure of the soil gets better, organic matter increases, and the soil becomes more porous and fertile. These well-structured soils let in moisture and air and let crop roots more easily reach the water and nutrients they need. But we shouldn't think of no-till as the end of the story. Diversify our crop rotations to include cover crops, forages, and high-residue crops. We add even more organic matter to the soil and accelerate those benefits of no-till. So think of conservation tillage as one part of a whole farm solution. Combined with other practices that improve the soil, no-till systems can help us reduce compaction, cycle nutrients, capture moisture, manage pests, sequester carbon, and protect water quality. There's much more to learn about conservation tillage and sustainable agriculture. You can start exploring today.
Right, so there you had it. Put in the no tillage and conservation tillage into perspective. Now, what we realize is that when you reduce tillage, you don't disturb the soil and you don't disturb the microbes and the living organisms that are beneficial to the actual soil itself. So, I mean, practically, if I've got a plot of land at Chickenstone in Gingerland, and when we started farming there, maybe 6 years ago, that entire plot was plowed, tilled, and to this day, we haven't had a plow in there since. And at that time, I really didn't have as much background with no tillage as I have today because of the ongoing research. But I'm just driving the point home that yes, the land is always got some kind of cover on it. We have in parts inorganic cover, which is the ground mat that suppress the weeds. In other parts, we've just got grass that we cut and turn it back into the soil, and that covers the land so that it's not exposed. And when the land is not exposed, there's a lot of benefits to it. It holds more moisture, for one. It reduces the evaporation of whatever moisture is there. And it reduces the erosion by wind and water. So that was, in a nutshell, what that video was trying to drive home. Now, let's look at the management of nutrients. Carefully planning the timing, the application method, the quantity of manure, compost, or even organic, not organic, but inorganic fertilizers, chemical fertilizers, would allow you to meet crop nutrient demands, minimizing nutrient excesses or deficiencies for that matter. We know that healthy, vigorous plants that grow quickly are better able to withstand pest damage. They're healthier plants, so they would try and ward off the damage caused by pests and diseases a lot better if you don't have healthy plants. But over-fertilizing crops can increase pest problems. Increasing soluble nitrogen levels in plants can decrease their resistance to pests. Well, that's what it does. Nitrogen is very good, but an over intake or uptake in nitrogen really leave the plants susceptible to pests and diseases. Maintaining a soil pH appropriate for the crop to be grown will improve nutrient availability and reduce toxicity. Maintaining adequate calcium levels will help earthworms thrive and improve soil aggregation. When I was small, I used to go around with my dad and try to kill as much earthworms as possible. No idea I had that the earthworms were beneficial insects and very beneficial to the soil. They go through the soil, creating air pockets so that oxygen and water could infiltrate the soil once you have a good population of earthworms. So those of you who were killing the earthworms, please don't do that. They're very beneficial to the soil. When you see the earthworms coming, they will tell you that, or give you a good indication that your soil is porous and is in good health. Next slide, please. Let's go to the next slide, Keaton. Lena. So there should be another one on manage nutrients. Yeah, that's it. Using diverse nutrient sources can help maintain soil health. So you want to do your compost. Yes, manure and compost add organic matter as well as an array of nutrients, but using just compost or manure to meet the nitrogen needs of crops every year can result in excessive phosphorus and soil levels. So like anything else, you want to have a good mix. It says combining modest manure or compost additions to meet phosphorus needs with additional nitrogen inputs from legumes, cover, or forage crops in a crop rotation can help balance nitrogen and phosphorus inputs. Forward, Lena. Thank you. We spoke about organic matter inputs. So to maintain or increase soil organic matter levels, inputs of organic matter must meet or exceed the losses of organic matter due to decomposition. We can't be extracting nutrients from the soil and not putting it back. Organic matter is, whether it be what we call dung manure or grass cuttings, leaves, all of that. Those are organic matter, and we must ensure that we keep adding them to the soil. Healthy crops can be a valuable source of organic matter, and crop residues should be returned to the soil to the extent possible. So wherever, once we reap a crop, for example, if we're doing a leafy crop, say callaloo, once we are finished with the, or even corn, we try to leave as much of the crop residue into the soil for it to add organic matter. Now, there are some exceptions, because if you grow a field of not tomatoes, but sweet potatoes, we know that the vines would sprout at every joint. So these are some of the crops that you wouldn't want to leave in the soil, because you would have growing up between whatever you plant, sweet potato again, and that could be a real hindrance. So you have to know what cover crops would not be sprouting from the residue. So bear that in mind. Not every crop residue you could leave behind, especially, this is another point though, especially if that crop had some kind of disease, whether it was fungus or some type of disease. You don't want to leave those residues behind, because that would remain into the soil, and the next crop that you plant, especially if it's of the same family, would attract that disease very early. And that's why you would see later on that crop rotation is very important. So incorporation of cover crops or perennial crops and judicious additions of animal and green manure, also compost, can be used to increase or maintain soil organic matter. Soil organic matter content can be monitored over time. For example, the appearance in the crop and the yield. So you need to be looking at your crops from day to day, from week to week. And if the crop is wilting, you should notice. If the leaves are yellowing, you should notice. And if the fruit is compromised, you should notice. And then you would realize that, hey, something is wrong with the actual fertility of the soil. You can request an organic matter analysis from the soil fertility or soil fertility analysis from the agriculture department. I'm not quite sure how efficient and effective they are, but I know that they had something in place a few years ago. They used to take samples and send them to the lab in some kits, and you would get back your results in a week or two. So that is something that I need to really tap into, but I really have not had to resort to that, as I try to adhere to the addition of organic matter on a regular basis. And we look at the reduction in pesticide use. This will provide habitat for beneficial organisms. Some people just go out and spray and use the harsh chemicals and spray inadvertently. They see one worm, two worms, and that's nothing to threaten your crops. You should not spray every time you feel like, you know, you've seen a worm or you've seen bugs or something like that. There must be some kind of threshold, and you have to decide that, listen, one or two worms, I could pick those off by hand. There's really no need to spray every time, because you're not only killing the pest, but you're killing the beneficial insects as well. So beneficial insects that contributes to biological control or pest organisms can be harmed by the application of broad spectrum insecticides. Farmscaping methods include the use of insectary plants, hedgerows, cover crops, and water reservoirs to attract and support populations of beneficial organisms, such as insects, spiders, amphibians, reptiles, bats, and birds that parasitize or prey on insect pests. So the beneficial insects, we try to encourage them as much as possible. I know in some farmscapes, they really don't use any pesticides or anything like that. In my dad's time, I never see him spray anything. At least we didn't have any chemicals to spray. But what he did was he employed the crop rotation. He would never plant the same thing on the same piece of land back to back. So he had a system where he would plant potatoes here this time, and then following up that might be a field of corn. So he would never try to plant the same, and I couldn't understand it. But you know, now I got into it and did the research. Yeah, you realize why. Because the diseases that will affect the sweet potato will not affect the corn. And so the crop rotation will come into play, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Farmscapes placed in contours between fields, steep ditches, or places that are easily eroded give stability to the soil. Farmscaping can be used as a filter strip to prevent water runoff and soil erosion. You want to reduce as much soil erosion as possible. The topsoil is really the nutrient base for the plants. Plants used in farmscapes contribute to healthy soil by adding organic matter. Here we go again with the organic matter. No matter where you go, you realize that the organic matter is very, very important to be constantly adding to the soil. All right, now that organic matter, yes, it is the base of the soil food web. So without that, we're not doing much. With the organic matter, we are really enriching the soil. Let's move on to cover crops. Not that one. We touch a bit on cover crops, and we're going to see how important the cover crops are. One thing I could say off the bat is that we should never leave the soil bare for too long. Cover crops contribute numerous benefits to soil health. They keep the soil covered during periods of time when the crops are not growing, reducing the risk of erosion. Now, this erosion could be from wind or heavy rains. So we want to reduce the erosion of the soil. The biomass produced by the cover crops is usually returned to the soil, enhancing organic matter levels. Now we see organic matter levels again. Cover crops with taproots can create macropores and alleviate compaction. We don't want that compaction in the soil, and that's why I'm encouraging you to run away from the heavy tractors for tilling. Initially, if the land was there for a long time, undisturbed, some schools of thought is to not even to till it in the first place, but to use conservation tilling procedures where you just dig where you're going to plant, because you don't want to disturb the microbes in the soil, the earthworms and so on. Fibrous rooted crops can promote aggregation and stabilize the soil. And we know taproot root crops, most of them root crops that we eat: carrots, beets, radish, cassava. One that stands out here that I must point out is papaya. It's not a root crop, but the roots are very big, and so they act similarly to taproots. Well, the root itself is a taproot, but you know, whereas we would eat the carrots and the potato and the radish, that fruit bears on top. So some people might not think that it's a taproot, but the roots of the papaya are taproots. Species of cover crops that host mycorrhizal fungi can sustain and increase the population of these beneficial fungi. Legumes, yeah, peas, beans. Legume cover crops can add nitrogen to the soil through nitrogen fixation or the nitrogen cycle. Cover crops can retain nitrate and other nutrients that are susceptible to leaching losses. Now, once the soil is covered, then you don't have, well, it's protected, so you don't have that leaching as you would if the soil is bare. When the soil is bare, you have the leaching, washing away of the nutrients, you have erosion, wind and rain, and so on. So it is very important that we keep the soil covered, whether using inorganic methods or organic methods. Personally, I prefer the organic methods because you get the organic matter coming back from the grass or the legumes or whatever we use as a cover crop. Now, we're gonna look at another short video on crop rotation. I think that video does it really well, so pay attention, please. Next slide. Same procedure, Lionel. It's the bars at the bottom.
Yes, it's just low.
Okay. All right, there we go.
Rotation. Some places are suitable for cultivation of only few crops. For example, in India, rice is grown in approximately 34% of the overall crop territory of the country. To get maximum yield, farmers grow same type of crop at same place again and again. This leads to reduction in availability of nutrients. But growing different crops can help retain nutrients. There are plants which are home to microorganisms that convert atmospheric nitrogen gas to nutrient. Leguminous plants have root nodes which are home to bacteria such as rhizobium. These bacteria depend on plants for food, and in exchange, they convert atmospheric nitrogen to nitrogen nutrients. Plant and bacteria form a symbiotic relationship. Some nutrients get absorbed by plants and rest mixes in soil. Gram, groundnut, wheat are examples of leguminous plants. When a different crop is grown after the crop of leguminous plants, excessive nutrients, which were mixed in soil, are utilized by it. Cultivation of different crops at a place in different seasons is known as crop rotation. Crop rotation results in increment of soil fertility.
Sorry, guys, just having a slight glitch. Lionel, could you go back and see if we could play that video.
Okay, no problem.
All right. No, back. Yeah. Just play it as it is. No YouTube, no nothing. Yeah.
Crop rotation. Some places are suitable for cultivation of only few crops. For example, in India, rice is grown in approximately 34% of the overall crop territory of the country. To get maximum yield, farmers grow same type of crop at same place again and again. This leads to reduction in availability of nutrients. But growing different crops can help retain nutrients. There are plants which are home to microorganisms that convert atmospheric nitrogen gas to nutrients. Leguminous plants have root nodes which are home to bacteria such as rhizobium. These bacteria depend on plants for food, and in exchange, they convert atmospheric nitrogen to nitrogen nutrients. Plant and bacteria form a symbiotic relationship. Some nutrients get absorbed by plants and rest mixes in soil. Gram, groundnut, wheat are examples of leguminous plants. When a different crop is grown after the crop of leguminous plants, excessive nutrients, which were mixed in soil, are utilized by it. Cultivation of different crops at a place in different seasons is known as crop rotation. Crop rotation results in increment of soil fertility.
Okay, I'm sorry about the quality of that video. I'm hoping that we got the gist of it. Basically, in a nutshell, crop rotation is one of the most important things that we need to do in terms of sustainable agriculture practices. Like I was alluding to earlier, you should not be planting the same crop on the same plot of land year after year, because what would happen sooner rather than later is that the crop would start to produce less and less, because the crop is taking the same nutrients from the soil and not adding back those nutrients to the soil. Some crops like legumes would add nitrogen and other nutrients to the soil. So you try to plant different things on the same plot of land that uses different amounts when it comes to nitrogen. So that's the idea. And the second thing is you would cut down on the pests and diseases from one crop to the other. So those are some of the important points in doing crop rotation. Let's move on to the next slide then, please. Now, the management of crops. And I want to spend a little time here because far too often I see people plant crops and don't give them the attention they need. I think all of us are guilty from time to time, especially if we have large plots of land. But what would happen is that if you treat the crops good, just like animals, just like people, you get good returns, right? So crop management basically start with the selection of seeds. And I'll spend some time on the selection of seeds as well. But once you've selected the seeds, then you sow these seeds, and it continues with the maintenance of that crop during growth and development. During the growth of the crop, you would have to, in some cases, prune the crop. You would have to trellis it. You would have to maybe in an outdoor setting. In the case of tomatoes or string beans, you might have to stake it. And it ends with the harvest, the storage, selling or distribution. And this is a broad sentence or statement. Got that from TV, 1990. But the seed selection, like I was alluding to, is very important. So good quality seeds are essential to grow a strong and healthy crop. Healthy seeds can be bought from trusted sources, or farmers can produce their own seeds. In that case, seed selection can be used to improve the quality and quantity of your yield. Now, if you have a crop and for some reason that it's a crop of tomatoes, and the tomatoes were deformed and out of shape and so on, or affected by some kind of disease, whether it is fungal or bacteria, something. It really doesn't make any sense to take those seeds to plant your next tomato crop. Seeds must, and I can't stress this enough, must be of good quality. You can't start off with poor seeds and then get poor seedlings and think you're gonna get nice, big, juicy fruits. It's not gonna happen. So don't even waste your time. Even if you bought a pack of seeds, you sow the seeds and the seedlings are not looking healthy, don't waste your time and plant them. You'll be wasting your energy. Start over and get some good quality seeds and cut your losses early and ensure that you get a good crop coming to the market. It's easier for me to lose 2 weeks of work than not to gain anything after 3-4 months. I don't know what you think, but that is just my take. There are several diseases that are transmitted via seeds. If seeds are from infected fields, if seeds from infected fields are used to grow the next crop, these seeds-borne diseases will immediately cause serious problems. That is what I was trying to get across, and I hope the message is clear. All right, next slide, please. Now, I attempted to spend a little time because I know there's a lot of confusion out there about seeds. And you hear organic seeds, heirloom seeds, hybrid seeds, GMO seeds, and so on. And there's a lot of unfounded theories taunting about. What I could tell you off the bat, let's forget about GMO seeds. GMO, genetically modified seeds, or genetically engineered seeds, we're not affected by that in the Caribbean. These GMO seeds are basically confined to soybeans and corn, and bred for multinational corporate farmers. We can't afford GMO seeds. So whether or not we are skeptical about using them because they're done in a lab, or we are so taken up about organic that we don't want to hear about GMO. And sometimes we pick up a pack of seeds in TDC or from agriculture or wherever, and we're wondering if they're GMO in any way. don't waste your time. They're not GMO seeds. We can't afford GMO seeds in this region, and they're not breeding GMO seeds for us at all. So let's try GMO out of the window once and for all. The heirloom seed and the organic seed. I really don't think there's much difference between the heirloom seed and the organic seed. I couldn't find a section on organic seeds to put into this presentation here, but they're basically done the same way in open pollinated, by open pollination, meaning that they're in the field and they're just pollinated. Now, the difference between the heirloom seed and the hybrid seed is that heirloom seed is an original seed that has been grown for generations. For example, and I've been talking about tomato, but it's easy. Everybody's familiar with tomato. You grow a tomato, and then you take the seed from that tomato and you plant it again. And the seed from that is planted again, and the seed from that is planted again. I think it has to be for 5 generations before it is considered to be heirloom. So when you see a seed, a pack of seeds, and it mark heirloom, you can trust that the fruit would be consistent to the parent fruit. So you don't have to wonder if your tomatoes would come round or if they would come long. Whatever the parent is, that is how that heirloom or organic seed is going to come. The difference the difference I find in the labeling of the seeds is that the seeds that are marked heirloom weren't certified by an organic lab or institute. So they go in the same way, but the farmer didn't or couldn't afford to pay the high price to get it certified. So that's why sometimes when we see organic seeds, we pay a premium, maybe 30, 40% more than the heirloom seed. We pay the premium for the certification, but the heirloom and the organic seed, as far as I'm concerned, I could be wrong, somebody may challenge me, but from all the research and all the courses that I've attended are one and the same. The hybrid seed, on the contrary now, is a seed that is been artificially pollinated. So, and it's cross-pollination as well. So you have 2 species of tomatoes, tomato A and tomato B. One might be in the same family, but different varieties. So there might still be the beefsteak tomato, but from 2 different families. And then they crossbreed them. So that's a hybrid. A hybrid is between 2 or more seeds. All right. So hybrid, it's a cross between A and B, B and C, or whatever the case may be. Now, the advantage of hybrid seeds is that sometimes they breed them that way to protect against certain diseases, might breed them that way for taste, for texture, and all of that. The hybrid seeds are very, very popular. Now, if you grow a hybrid tomato and you harvest the seed from that hybrid tomato, there's no guarantee that the fruit would come similar to the parent fruit, because anything that is hybrid tends to go back through the to the original plant itself. Let me drive this home a little bit. We are like the Amrapali mango, but most of the polymango and the graft and the Julie mango that we get are from a graft from another polymango tree or another Julie mango tree. If you take that seed now and you plant it, you might get a long mango, because the parent tree was that of a long mango. So when you take Amrapali and you graft it onto it, there's no guarantee that this seed that you get from that amri-poly would come amri-poly. It might very well revert to a lamb mango. That's why the amri-poly mango seed or the Julie mango seed is never really planted for commercial purposes, because you don't know what you're getting. And so I decided to spend a little time on the seed so that you could have a better understanding, because it took me a while to figure out what is what, a better understanding of the different types of seeds. So when you go to purchase seeds, and one say heirloom and one say organic, if your pocket is so deep that you want to spend the extra money to buy the organic seed, feel free. But the heirloom seed is no different. The hybrid seed is a popular seed. It gives you nice fruits. But if you want to harvest the seeds to plant again, don't do it from the hybrid. Go back to the heirloom or the organic. All right. So much for that. I think we've covered that. Let's spend a little bit of time now talking about, next slide, please, the care of the seedlings. And on the right of your screen, you'd see some trays and you would see some seedlings. This is a picture that I took from my nursery. That's right inside. Might notice some tiles on the floor. And it's not because I had extra monies. What it was is that we were using that particular greenhouse for microgreens. And microgreens are very delicate, and they go from seed to maturity in 7 to 10 days, and straight from there onto the plate. So we tile the floor for sanitation purposes, to keep it really, really clean. And so when the hotels come around to examine where the food is coming from, they have no qualms or issues with it. So those are 50 cell trays, and you realize these are lettuce, and they're in what we call a seedling trough. Now, at A1 Farms, we use 50 cell trays, and the reason why we use 50 cell trays is just a matter of preference. I find that the 50 cell tray, the cells are a little bit bigger as opposed to the 72 cell tray. So the roots, the root structure get a little bit more space to develop. So I get much better seedlings. Now, these in these trays, we use a grow mix, professional grow mix called ProMix. In hydroponics, they would use another grow medium, because the ProMix is similar to dirt. It would disintegrate if you immerse it straight in water if you're doing hydroponics. So in hydroponics, they would use a medium like rock wool. Okay. So once you sow the tray, once you sow the seeds, we keep these seeds in the shade house or in a dark environment for germination. Germination would take place much quicker in a dark place. Once the seeds are germinated, you would take those seeds out of that dark place and expose them to light. Because for plants to grow, 3 things, remember from grade school, you need light, very important. You need water, and you need sunlight. You notice they didn't say soil, right? Because hydroponics, you could grow, and aquaponics and aeroponics, you could grow without any type of soil at all. So we use the osmosis method of watering our seedlings. So the watering tray on your right, we would just submerge the seedling tray straight into the trough, and the seedlings would absorb the water through osmosis, just pull it up. Reason why we do that is that we find that when the seedlings are in such infant stage, they're very delicate. And some people would use a watering can and throw water on top. What that does, it suppresses the seedling such that the seedling would have to struggle to get back up. So it really stunts it really stunts the growth of the seedling. So we find that the osmosis method works fine for us. So I'm just passing some of those tidbits as I go along. And so once we expose the seedlings to light, we keep the seedlings in the seedling house for, in the case of lettuce, for about 3 weeks. In the case of, say, cucumbers, maybe about 10 days. Once it put out the third leaf, which we call the true leaf, then the cucumber is ready to be planted. But the lettuce takes a little bit longer before you can transplant it. Peppers would normally take about 4 weeks. Yes, you could plant them at 3, but I find I get much better results if they're a little bit more sturdy when you're transplanting them, especially if you're going to transplant them outdoors. You need them to be a little bit hardier. And what you could do if you're going to plant outdoors is gradually harden them up, meaning for an afternoon, say 3 days before you go, or 4 days before you go transplant them, every afternoon you just put them out in the sun for about 2 hours so that they kind of climatize, so that when you plant them outdoors and they get the direct sunlight, they're not shocked to death. You realize a lot of times people plant outside and the seedlings just burn. The intensity of the sun just burn the seedling. A lot of times that is due partly because the seedling is not hardy enough to withstand the shock coming from the seedling stage in a shaded environment to full sun. So you introduce the seedlings to full sun on a gradual basis. All right, I think we would have covered most of what I wanted to cover. Now, I would suggest that we take 5 minutes, gather your thoughts, get hydrated, and come back with all of your questions. I think this is the session now where we share our experiences, share our thoughts, ask the questions, and feed off of one another. Okay, so let's, Linnell, you take charge of the time. We're going to suspend now for 5 minutes.
Yes,
and
of course.
yeah, get back. Thank you for your attention. You could just put up the last slide if you want.
Okay, so our 5 minutes are up. So anybody, if any questions, it's your time.
Hello.
Helena, think I'm seeing something in the chat. Someone is talking about the watering system. Yeah, when I started, I built that trough from materials I had in my yard. I've since upgraded to some hard plastic troughs that I brought in from overseas. But the trays, the seedling trays, usually 10 by 20 in 10 inches by 20 inches, 10 inches wide, 20 inches long. So what I would recommend, if you want, you could make a box. First box I made it 24 inches, so I could hold 2 across, and then I made it 48 inches. So 24 by 48, that would hold 4 trays. It really depends on the. Could we mute our mics, please? Thank you. That really depends on the volume of seedlings that you're doing. If it is that you're just doing 2 trays a week, then you could get a smaller box, which is maybe 12 by 22. So you could, just fit 1 tray in there at a time. But I would suggest that you make some room for expansion. So make it 24 across, 24 wide by 48 long, and you just need maybe about 6 inches deep, 4 to 6 inches deep, and line it with a hard with a plastic, a really sturdy plastic. We use the plastic that we would cover the greenhouse with. Yeah, so that's an idea. Yeah, so that is one way of doing it. Like I say, I could definitely get the proper trays, but that's something you could look at for starters.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Mr. Trust, this is Joyce.
Yes, Joyce.
Okay, I saw my colleague, Mrs. Elliott Ermelito, she put in something in the chat there that I was about to question as well. She was trying to find out, okay, what can deter the squash, etc. But my question was going to be on what she has it as the alternate things. My thing is though, how does forking, and hoeing affect the microorganisms in the soil? Because I know you have said that and I'm in support of the fact that the plows with their heavy wheels, they do compact, and sometimes in looking to get more, we actually get less technically because there's so much damage done and all of that. So what would be the impact of hoeing and forking on the same microorganisms? Are they going to be similarly destroyed a lot, like with the using of heavier equipment?
Well, let me
I didn't say. Fantastic
yeah,
presentation.
let me put it this
That's
way.
one question. I have some more.
Okay. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Let me put it this way. The tractors, not only do they damage the microorganisms, but they compact the soil quite a bit. And so you would realize, just think about this. If the tractor comes through, it plows, it harrows, it does whatever, and then you get a heavy rainfall, you realize that there's a lot of water settling in between the banks in the furrow. And this is because the soil has been compacted. So the water doesn't infiltrate into the soil where it needs to go for the plant roots to take it up. Now, as opposed to hoeing, you don't have that heavy compaction. You have some compaction, yes, but you don't have that heavy compaction. But what you have with the hoeing and the forking to a lesser extent is the chopping up of the earthworms and some of these, and disturbing some of the habitat for the microorganism. What we're saying here is that, yes, you could still do a little bit of forking, but why would you want to fork a row that is 100 feet, fork every half foot or every foot, and you're only planting in 24-inch spaces? You're getting me? So
yes, I am. I'm understanding. I'm trying to get. That's why I'm trying to ask to get a better understanding, because
right. So you really don't need to fork between those 24 inches, because for example, if you're planting tomatoes or you're planting sweet peppers, the spacing is about 24 inches apart. So you're encouraged to just dig where you're going to plant. The area between there is used for whatever cover crop it is, whether it's grass or otherwise. And then if you realize, a lot of people know when they're going through with a weed whacker. And so they're just cutting the grass in between the tomatoes. Now, when the tomatoes or the peppers reach a certain height, they would provide shelter so that those organic matter that you cut under there would even suppress the grass from growing anymore. And that is it. That is the trick. But people still like to go in to see that the land look nice and bare and all of that. But what that does is it exposes the soil to erosion by wind and rain.
Oh, okay. I'm laughing because I'm guilty of.
Yeah, we all are. Like I said,
I'm guilty because I like to see my garden very clean. And
yeah,
so I really do understand that, and sometimes I often wonder why my crops are not doing as good as they ought to, as opposed, well, some of them do not fare well in the grass, but I find that some of them do well with the grass, between them. And so I'm like, okay, so you're getting really nice.
What you're gonna be doing is where you're gonna be planting. That little area where you're gonna be planting, that is where you dig the hole. And in between there, you leave the grass however it is. Because I'll tell you, when the soil is bare, there's nothing at all to prevent the evaporation of the water, then the nutrients. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm understanding you.
Right.
Okay, finally, before someone else, so I can get another colleague an opportunity.
Sure.
I noticed that you use the trays, and I like the idea of the trays, but the size of the seeds, how do you do? Do you sow them in bulk and then transfer them one by one, or you do them one by, or you have a seeder?
No, one at a time. My seeder is my wife. She goes through like a machine.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. Okay, now to the manure use. Okay, incorporating the nutrients. How would the nutrients be affected? Because I know we tend to use a lot of manure from the sheep and or goats. However, we do recognize now that persons are supplementing the feed for animals, with the grains. How would that affect the manure and the nutrients that goes into the soil?
I don't think it has much of a difference in terms of the quality of the manure, because remember, those grains are made from the same organic matter. They're made from corn, they're made from, so, okay, look at rabbits. Most rabbits that are reared, are grown, are reared in commercial settings, and that is the manure that they use. So there's really no noticeable difference at all, because the animal is feeding on grain or grass. There's really no noticeable difference.
Okay, thank you very much. I will listen to what my other colleagues.
I would prefer the questions direct from persons. That's just me. The interaction gives me a little energy.
That's good. All right, thanks so much for answering my question. Thank you.
Next question or comment, please.
I'm here.
Okay. And
good evening. I have a few questions.
What's your name?
Oh, my name is Tishari.
Okay, Tishari. Go right ahead, please.
Okay, the first question I think you kind of answered it just now, but just to be clear, when you were talking about the use of cover crops, I was wondering if the weed, because you made mention of grass a couple of times. I don't know if grass is weed. So are you talking about the weeds? Because the weeds, can they be cover crops as well? Is it
anything that covers the soil is a cover crop. So yeah, now you have because we're planting all year round, we don't necessarily would plant a cover crop like a commercial setting. Most of these commercial farms would plant now, and then because they have seasons, they would put in something like a legume crop that would stay there over the winter and dry down and that kind of stuff. We don't need to do that here. So our cover crop could be grass. It could be anything that grows up between the planting area. We use the example of tomatoes. Anything that grow up between that 2 feet space between plants, that's a cover crop. Now, the trick for the cover crop once you're planting your main crop is to keep it low so that it doesn't compete with the main crop for a lot of nutrients and so on. But what the cover crop does, it helps to minimize evaporation and all of that as well. And it adds back the organic matter from the leaves or in terms of the grass, from the grass back into the soil.
Okay. Cool. Okay, I can understand. Another question was with regards to the seeds. You mentioned that we need to plant good quality seeds. You spoke about the seedlings that come from the seeds, but I was wondering if there was a way that you can identify what's a good seed prior to sowing it.
It's very difficult. What we have to do is get seeds from trusted seed companies.
Okay.
Yeah, and like I said, if you buy some seeds and they're hybrid seeds, be cautious against harvesting those seeds and trying to replant them, because you never know what you're gonna get.
Right.
All right, because they tend to revert back to the original plant, and we don't know what that original plant is.
Right.
So the organic seed or the heirloom seed, one and the same as far as I'm concerned. Those are the seeds that if you're gonna harvest seeds, those are the seeds that you should look to.
Okay. Okay, another question in seeds. Does the seed have like a lifespan when you store it? Does it have a lifespan? Because I think I got some beet seeds from the agriculture department last year sometimes. But last year I used to get beets, but I find I sowed some like recently, and it doesn't feel like any of them came.
So they didn't germinate, is that it?
It doesn't seem so.
Okay.
It's been weeks, and I think it's been two.
Yeah, well, no, count your losses and move on. What's happening here though? I've got seeds that dates back to, because I've got a cooler. I've got proper storage for the seeds, and that is key if you're going to buy a lot of seeds. You know, one of those drink coolers, that is what I store my seeds in, but I'm not like the regular farmer, so I got lots of seeds. Okay. And so the storage is a critical issue when it comes to seeds. You must store them in a cool environment. Yeah, so even in your fridge door, that's a nice place.
Okay.
Yeah, but don't leave them just out in the heat and so on. They would go barren within months.
Okay.
Now, I've seen people and heard stories of people leaving their seeds in the car for a week. Just forget them on the dashboard or in the back seat. By the time they plant them, they're no good. That excessive heat would just kill the embryo of the seed. Yeah.
I might have a host of dead seeds around here.
Well, try them before you throw them out.
Okay, yes, I will. Thanks for that. And then one last question, still in seeds. You mentioned heirloom, hybrid, and GMO, but usually when I purchase seeds, they would say non-GMO. Which category does those?
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. We don't have to worry about genetically modified seeds in this area. They're not reaching us at all. We can't afford to pay for them in the first place.
Also, the non-GMO that we buy, it would either be a
heirloom
or
a hybrid or something like that.
Okay, got you.
Yeah, but the non-GMO is just to assure you that it's not genetically engineered or modified in any way, shape, form, or fashion.
Okay.
Okay.
Got you. Thank you.
No problem. Keep the questions coming. Amelita, you posted something in the chat?
Yes, I did.
Okay, let me hear you.
Yes, I was asking, how do we control the worms? Now we are more or less being discouraged from using a lot of pesticides, but how do we control the worms like on butternut squashes? Because after a time you find that they attract a lot of worms.
Yeah, you see what happens here, and this is where crop rotation comes in. But if you've planted the butternut squash and you're getting impacted by worms, there's one worm out there called the armyworm, which is a small green worm that attacks squash, pumpkin, watermelons, I think. But it's hardly anything you could do with that armyworm, because I would tell you that armyworm would move in just like a brigade, and you would notice it on a Monday, and by the time you even get to spray, your crop is gone. Barring the armyworm though, there's something we use called neem oil. It's a broad spectrum oil. It's an organic oil, and it covers all the area. It's a miticide, insecticide, fungicide, and so you could use that neem oil and spray your crops without any kind of fear or hesitation that you're using a harsh chemical.
Well, agriculture at some point recommended Numectin. What are your thoughts on that one?
Well, I've used Numectin. It's not too bad. It's not like those harsh knockdown chemical. So you might not get results right away. But the Numectin definitely is tolerable in terms of the chemical makeup of it. It's not a harsh insecticide. I myself use Numectin.
And how often would you be able to use, for example, after the onset of the worms?
You would say again, please?
How often? Okay, for example, like 2 weeks ago, we sprayed the butternut squash, but you know, after we realized up to yesterday, there were quite a lot of those armyworms. So I went through each row and more or less picked them, but you know, the back breaking and time consuming.
Right. Well, the directions are on it, but I think the frequency is 5 to 7 days, if I could remember correctly. Between intervals.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but that armyworm, I haven't seen anything that is effective in dealing with it, and maybe it's because I don't use the harsh chemicals, let's say from TDC or I really don't want to call names, but the harsh chemicals.
All right, thank you. I will still pursue because I just love to see butternut squash growing.
Oh yeah, well you can't give up. It's something. Sometimes we say in agriculture, you win some and you lose some, but let's hope that you're winning them more than you lost.
That's true. And I was rather surprised to realize too that the horned worms are on the cassava. I didn't realize that cassavas attract such.
Yeah. Not as many, but they do.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Okay, if you could just bear with me a moment. I think my lack of experience in farming.
No problem. Your name, please?
I'm trying to better understand what you were saying about tillage and that you're saying you don't plow at all, right? And are you able to do that because you have the matting?
No. Like I said, in some areas I have the ground cover, the matting, and in other areas I have no matting at all. But you see, what you would do is you would control the cover crop, whether it's grass or weeds that's coming up. You would control that.
Mm-hmm. And by control, you mean you decide what you allow to grow as a cover crop?
Well, not only that. Sometimes, yeah, because if you have, we used to have a thing called whitehead, and we would just pull those up because they're just a nuisance. But what I'm saying here is that if grass is growing between the crop, then you use a weed whacker and you cut the grass ever so often. Now, once the crop reaches a certain height, it would shelter the grass, and then there's no need to weed whack after. They would just stay stunted. But the essence is to not leave the soil bare and to have some kind of organic matter on the soil at all times.
So you're saying that once you're ready to move those young plants into the ground, you just plant them in between the bush?
Well, you clear the area where you're going to plant, okay? And the bush itself, you cut that down because you don't want the bush sheltering the plants, but you don't want to uproot everything either.
So when you say clear, what methods are you using? You're just cutting it down to the ground?
You could just use a machete and cut that 1 foot area where the plant is going to go.
Okay, so you're planting your young plants in the ground, in between whatever is already there, cut low.
Exactly. But whatever is there, you make sure that it doesn't come above 4 inches above the surface of the soil. You just want the soil covered.
So you just go there, dig a hole and put it in.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's one. The second one with the matting. How long, is there a period of time you leave the matting down for?
No, I mean, I've seen people have matting down for years. And because it's just covering the soil, whether you do it using organic methods or inorganic methods, you just want to cover the soil.
But that's what I was wondering about, because are there any disadvantages to that? How would the soil then how would like that organic breakdown you have when plants and stuff fall in the ground and it decomposes and it gets into the soil, that process would not occur like it would?
No, that would not happen. But what would happen here is that you would still have your microbial activity under the matting with your earthworms and your other organisms. So where you're planting now is where you're going to add your organic matter.
But you remember you were talking about plant resin, that if you don't plow, it allows the plant resin to stay on the ground.
Right. So remember,
that wouldn't be the case if you have matting then.
No, but remember, before you put the matting down, you would have that resin there, so that would stay under there for as long as, and decompose.
Forever? So, okay. So I just wanted to be clear on that.
Yeah, and because you see, the actual, it's a give and take. I mean, I, for one, prefer the natural method over the matting, but the matting is a lot easier. It save you on labor. You wouldn't have to come through and weed whack and keep the shrubs down and that kind of thing. Yes, it would do the same as the mulch in terms of the evaporation and covering the soil and prevent it from being eroded. But then there's a trade-off. You don't get, like you said, the organic matter into the soil.
Okay, that's what I wanted to be clear on.
Yeah.
I just left me a little confused.
No problem at all.
Thank you.
All right, good night. This is Carol. I'm in Barbados. and I got some soil from somewhere, and this soil is clay, and it's very hard, especially when it gets dry. It's so hard that I don't even have a problem with weeds. What can I do?
How you get your stuff grow?
Then there's some areas where I get water. I run water from the
kitchen
house, yeah,
okay.
kitchen to that area. So the one that's constantly wet. I grow things around there, but I want to use most of the yard. How do I breathe life into that clay soil? Because it's really, when the weeds are in, they're locked in, they're breaking off, it's really hard. And when I wet it, it's like sloshing and sticking to everything.
In a case like that, you might need to turn over that soil.
When it's dry?
Yeah, well, when it's dry, it's going to be very difficult. When it's wet, right. You see, the problem with clay soil is that when it's wet, it becomes like clunks. It clods together. And when it's dried, it separates. So you have to find some kind of happy medium between there. When it's not so wet, and get it turned over. Because with every rule, there's an exception. Eh? With this clay soil, you might have to turn it over at least once and add some sand or some organic matter to it to break up the clay.
Right. There's some. I was planning to add some cow manure and grass to it. Would that help the quality of the soil?
That would help. The other thing is, what you might want to do is truck in some topsoil instead of fighting with all that clay. Is to truck in some topsoil and maybe have a couple inches, maybe about 4 inches of topsoil on top of the clay. That would eventually help break up and change the properties of that clay. Now, the other thing is the cow manure. You could lace it with cow manure first and then put the topsoil on it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But yes, clay is very, very difficult to work with.
All right, thank you.
No trouble.
Yeah, Maki, I want to encourage that young lady from Barbados, because when we moved here, that was the same problem we had, and we used sand, we used manure from the goats in the surrounding area, and topsoil. So I want to encourage her that she will get some success if she tries that.
Beautiful testimony. And what is your soil like now, Amelita?
Much better than what it was, because it was very, very clayey.
So the trick was some sand, some manure, and some topsoil.
Yes.
Okay.
That was it.
Yeah, that is what I recommended as well. Yeah. So keep at it. I mean, like the plot of land I had at Chicken Stone. When I started farming there, some people asked me, you know, if I think I'm going to get anything out of it, because the soil was so tight, so clay. As a matter of fact, there was and still is a pond right next to it, how clay the soil is. And we just started adding manure and a truckload of sand, just spread it. And you're frightened to see, you walk there now and you could even use your hand and dig the soil. It is loose after a while. Yeah, so it takes a little bit of work, but it will happen. Anybody else?
Just my final question for the evening. In terms of I noticed you said you use for the osmosis effect for the seedlings. When you are they are planted out now, how do we deal with that? Is it best to use a drip line that goes directly to the roots, a watering can, a hose, and splash them?
No. What watering can is when you're dealing with flowers and so on. Yeah, when we're dealing with plants, yeah, we're gonna cover that later. But since you asked, yes, the drip line is recommended because you're watering and you're conserving your water. You're watering directly to the root of the plant. So you're not using a watering can, because the watering can tend to wash away the soil from the root of the plant. Just check to see, put yourself back using a watering can. The little bit of physics, the depth, the pressure depends on the depth. So when you hold your hand up with the watering can, it's a lot of pressure coming down. It looks, yes, it's spraying, but there's a lot of pressure coming down. And what that does is it washes away the topsoil from the root of the plant. And sometimes it leaches the nutrients as well. So you really want to use some kind of drip irrigation, with a drip line or a drip peg, and put it directly to the plant or close enough to the plant. Now, because the nature of the drip line is that there's some drip lines that would give you a half a gallon of water per hour, 1 gallon per hour. It really depends on what you're planting and the time of year. But the drip line releases the water very slowly, so the water soaks and not run off. So you get maximum use of the water. And you use a lot less water than regular irrigation. So yes, the drip line is definitely recommended. Now, the drip line could be a simple system. You could have a gravity-fed system. Most of the lands are sloped, and if they're not sloped, you could just elevate a water tank maybe about 4 feet off the ground, and you would frighten to see the pressure that comes out of that. So it would run just like a normal pipe. So you don't have to set up no pumps or anything like that if you don't have the government mains water. You could use some kind of water catchment system and gravity feed it to your plants. All right.
My last question, Mr. Trott, please.
Sure.
Yes, I was asking, well, we've gone on a new area of land, and I was wondering, how can we test the pH of the soil?
There's some, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's some simple tests you could use. You could get some kits. I think TDC might have some kits, but the extension division at agriculture should be able to help you out. Now, there's some home remedies as well. If you take a sample of soil and wash it out in a container, and then you get some vinegar, and you add the vinegar to it. If it fuzzes, you know your soil is a little bit alkaline. If you do the same thing, but this time you use some baking soda and it fuzzes, you know the soil is a little bit on the acidic side. Now, if nothing happens, if you don't get any fuzz using any one of them, you know that your soil is good. It's between, say, 6 and 7, where it's neither too acidic or alkaline. But those are simple things that you could use at home. It's not scientific, because it's not going to tell you, oh, my soil is 5.8 or my soil is 6.4, but it gives you an understanding whether it's alkaline or acidic.
Okay,
can you repeat those two things again for me, please?
Okay.
I got baking soda and repeat it.
Baking soda, that would tell you whether it's acidic, and the vinegar is an alkaline solution. So vinegar, white vinegar, will tell you if it's alkaline. Now, if it doesn't fuzz, your soil is good. It's almost like a neutral pH, which is good for most plants. I'll turn on my video for a split second. Really don't want to compromise the session. but I'll just hold up the neem oil so you could see what it looks like. This one is triple action.
Okay, thank you.
It's insecticide, miticide, and fungicide. I don't know if it's available around here. I had these since just before COVID when I was able to travel. So these are the ones I use. Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, this is Tishari again. I don't know if the lady was finished, but a question came to my mind as y'all were talking about the neem.
Sure.
I have tried like a neem solution where I boil the neem and stuff. So I'm wondering if the oil is more effective than that. I've Googled how to make the oil and stuff, but it seems like
It's a chore.
lengthy.
Yeah, it's a chore. It's a task and a half.
Yes.
Yeah, when I did a lot of open field, I used to soak the neem bush with the seeds and leave it there for about 3 weeks. Now you have to set yourself to use that, because it really doesn't smell good. Yeah, I had good success with it, but you have to leave it there for a lengthy period of time, like 3 to 4 weeks. So what I did, I got one of those 50-gallon drums, like the oil drums or the barrel, the plastic barrel, and just pack the leaves and the seeds in that, and then throw water on it, and then cover it and just forget about it.
Where do you get the seeds? On the trees?
Yeah, on the trees when they start to seed, because yeah. But in the event you don't have the seeds, just use a bush. But you're gonna have, yeah, don't leave it for just 2-3 days. Leave it for about 3 weeks to a month, and then you take it out, you strain it off, and then you use it, because you don't want to put, you want to make sure that the leaves don't get into your sprayer or anything like that to clog it up. So you just strain it off, and then you use it. But like I said, if you could set yourself, because it really stinks. I'm not polishing it up. It really stinks. Yeah, but it works. It really works. Yeah. It's a good repellent for insects. But we see some stuff on our plants, like the sooty mole and all of that. Good old soapy water would do the trick. Once a week, just spray them with soapy water, and that tends to do the trick for me, especially on the citrus and mango trees and so on.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
Any more questions, concerns, comments? I think we had a lively discussion, and I'm looking forward to our next session, where we would probably get into, let me see what I'll cover next. Yeah, we're gonna talk about water as a resource, and see how best we could manage the water. We know that water is a real scarcity, and we get affected by droughts and hurricanes and all of this. So we're gonna see how best we could learn some tricks about mitigating against water and the proper use of water and all of that. So just bear that in the back of your mind. And I'm hoping that the discussion tonight, like I say, these discussions are what, and experiences are what we learn from. I am not gonna come here and lecture to you for 2 hours, because that is not the goal. The goal is to be as interactive as possible, so that you could share experiences and we could learn from each other. Okay, guys? And with that said, I would say thank you for your attention, and want to bid everyone safe and enjoyable night. See you tomorrow.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
blessed
Good night.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thanks for the
Ms. Cross.
presentation.
Appreciate it.
Have a good night, everyone. I will see you all in our next session tomorrow.
Thank you, Linnell. Good job.
Have a good night.
Yeah,
Bye.
you too. Bye-bye.